The ground didn't look special at first. A patch of dirt behind the old woods in Ludlow, Maine, cold, uneven, littered with broken sticks and the smell of pine. But anyone who lived there long enough knew you didn't step past the deadfall after sunset. Because sometimes when the wind died down, you could still hear things moving in that soil. Things that had no business being alive. It started like any other quiet tragedy, a family looking for peace, a new home, a second chance. But in Ludlow, peace was the one thing you never buried. Lewis Creed was a doctor, logical, steady, used to fixing things that broke. When he moved his wife, Rachel, and their 2 children to the White House near the woods, he didn't believe in curses. He believed in medicine, in routine, in the promise of a quiet life. Their neighbor, Judd Crandall, old, polite, with a voice like worn gravel, greeted them from across the road that first evening. He said the woods had stories. Lewis smiled and said he'd heard a few himself. Judd didn't smile back. He just nodded and said softly, "Hope you never have to find out which ones are true." A week later, Ellie, Lewis's daughter, found the path. It was small, hidden between tall weeds behind the house, a thin trail leading into trees that bent strangely inward. Her cat, Church, darted ahead, chasing something unseen. When she told her father about it, Lewis followed the trail the next morning. He stopped when he saw the first grave, a small mound of stones with a crude wooden marker carved with a child's handwriting. "Spot, our beloved friend." Behind it were dozens more. Pet collars. Names. Dates. Some so old the wood had turned gray. Judd found him there later that day, standing in silence. "Town kids've been burying their pets there since before I was born," Judd said quietly. "Sometimes it helps. Gives them a place to say goodbye." Lewis nodded. He didn't believe in ghosts, but something about the air felt heavier past those markers. He thanked Judd and went home, not thinking much of it. But that night, he dreamed of the same place again. This time, the graves went on forever, and in the dark beyond the trees, something whispered his name. 2 weeks later, Church was hit by a truck on the highway. Lewis found the body himself, still warm, limp in the grass. He wrapped the cat in a blanket and stood there for a long time, unsure how to tell Ellie. When Judd appeared behind him, it was as if the old man had been waiting. "Don't tell her yet," he said. "Come with me." They walked past the pet cemetery, deeper into the woods where the air grew cold and silent. "Where are we going?" Lewis asked. "Somewhere beyond," Judd said. They climbed until the ground turned to rock and the trees thinned out. At the top was a clearing, a circle of black soil surrounded by ancient stones. The smell was strange, like metal and rot. Judd's voice trembled slightly when he said, "This here's older than the town. Older than anyone knows." Lewis didn't ask what it was called. He didn't have to. The ground felt wrong, pulsing, waiting. "Bury him here," Judd said, voice low. "Don't ask questions. Just do it before it's dark." Lewis dug with his hands until they bled. The dirt was cold and wet, heavier than it should have been. When the grave was finished, he placed Church inside, covered him, and stood silently beside Judd. Neither man spoke on the way back. That night, Lewis lay awake listening to the wind, except it wasn't the wind. It was a soft thumping sound, rhythmic, coming from outside. He didn't get up. In the morning, Rachel screamed. Church was back. His fur was matted, his eyes dull, and his body smelled faintly of dirt and iron. He moved slower than before, watching the family from corners of the room, almost studying them. Lewis said nothing. Judd came over that night, eyes tired. "You didn't think it'd be the same, did you?" he said quietly. Lewis didn't answer. Judd added, "Sometimes dead is better." Days turned to weeks. Church killed every bird and mouse in sight, leaving them lined neatly at the porch as if offering tribute. Ellie stopped letting him in her room. Rachel complained of nightmares, of whispers coming from the woods, calling their names one by one. Lewis tried to rationalize it. Maybe grief. Maybe suggestion. But then one night he saw Church sitting at the foot of his bed, staring not at him but at the wall, where no one stood. And yet a shadow moved there, breathing slowly. By the time the snows came, the woods no longer felt like part of their land. Judd avoided the path altogether. Lewis found himself drawn to it instead, unable to stop thinking about that cold soil, that promise of reversal. He told himself he'd never go back. But death has a way of changing its mind. Because the thing about the pet cemetery isn't what comes back. It's what follows at home. The wind howled outside as he closed the curtains, but even through the walls, Lewis could hear something moving in the distance. Something that sounded almost human, whispering softly, "You did this once. You'll do it again." The winter light in Ludlow was thin and sharp. It made the White House look smaller and lonelier. Louis Creed felt older than he should. He kept the same routine: coffee at dawn, rounds at the hospital, small smiles for Rachel. But at night he walked the edge of the yard and watched the tree line. He told himself to stop thinking about the black soil. He told himself church was only a cat again and that the quiet in the house came from the snow. Yet every time he passed the window, he saw a dark shape at the edge of the woods, like someone waiting for him to look away. Ellie changed slowly. She still did her homework and laughed at movies, but sometimes she would stare into empty rooms as if listening to something far away. She kept her door closed and left a small lamp on every night. Once, Louis found her sitting on the floor with a stuffed bear she had had since babyhood. She held it tight and hummed a tune she hadn't known she remembered. "It's nothing," she said when he asked. Her voice had a thinness to it that set Louis's teeth on edge. Church became a different animal. He stopped rubbing against hands and instead sat at windows like a guardian. He brought gifts to the doorstep: small birds, a dead mouse, a beetle with its shell split like a tiny boat. Louis would pick the things up with a paper towel and put them in the trash. He felt sick more than saddened. Once at midnight, Louis woke to a sound like scratching under the floor. He went to the hall in his slippers and found Church sitting on the rug, staring at the door as if someone stood on the other side. Louis laughed quietly to hide the fear and shut the door. Judd watched the family with a tired kindness. He came over less and less. When Louis did see him, Judd's hands trembled as if from a cold that wasn't weather. He would warn Louis again in a low voice, "You fool with things that sleep, sometimes they change what they are." Louis would answer with calm words: "Grief, human choice, love." Judd only shook his head. Once, as if to prove the point, Judd showed Louis an old photograph from his pocket: a boy and a small dog at a fair. The boy had a smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. Under the picture in faded ink was a note: "Leave it be." One night, when the moon was a thin silver coin, Rachel woke to the sound of a child calling softly from the dark. She thought it was a dream until she heard it again, a small voice saying, "Mommy?" Her heart tripped. She went downstairs, and on the kitchen floor were tiny wet prints that led from the back door and paused by the sink. They were not animal tracks. She wept quietly, and Louis sat with her and held her hand. He wanted to explain, but he felt the words fall like pebbles in his mouth. When they followed the prints outside, they ended at the tree line and vanished into the white hush. The town noticed changes. Neighbors saw shadows move a little too slow, or lights that blinked where no one lived. A baker 2 streets over told Louis that his old dog had begun barking at nothing at 3 a.m., and then stopped and stared at the sky. Rumors spread at the grocery store like spilled sugar. People said the ground beyond the deadfall hummed like a sleeping engine. Folks who had once been practical now crossed themselves in the church doorway. The small, polite town started to feel as if it held its breath all the time. Louis could not keep his hands off the soil. He told himself he would not go. He told himself that burying a small thing once had been enough of a sin. But one morning he found his boots wet with mud he could not remember tracking. He woke from a short, heavy sleep to a lump of earth under the porch step that rolled quietly when he touched it. In his coat pocket, he found a small stone that had not been there before. It fit in his palm like a button pressed by an old thumb. He kept it in his drawer and did not tell Rachel. Secrets grew like roots when you left them alone. Winter loosened its grip, and the first thaw made the river soft and thick. People began to saw logs and clear drives. One day a neighbor's child, a boy named Tommy, disappeared for an hour. He had been playing near the field and then was gone. The town searched with flashlights and called names into the air until the cold turned their noses red. They found him sitting at the edge of the pet cemetery, boots on the stones, humming a tune he could not recall learning. His eyes were bright and empty, and when he spoke his words were slow and careful. He said he had been listening to the place. He could not explain what that meant. Fear sharpened into action. A small group of neighbors met at the town hall and argued about what to do. Some wanted to burn the mound and salt the earth. Others said that would only anger whatever lived there. Judd came with a bent old shovel and a face that had seen more than anyone liked to know. "You cannot fight what you think is hungry," he told them. "You can only choose not to feed it." But human grief is loud and hungry, and sometimes louder than the best of warnings. That night, someone from town left a small toy on the highest stone, a child's truck, and later a woman swore she heard the sound of small wheels rolling away. It was a slow, terrible morning when Louis woke to a noise like crying and laughter at once, a sound that made his hands shake but his legs move. He walked through the house with his heart under his ribs and found the back door open. The path was filled with small prints, and at the end, the black soil of the special ground had a new mound. On top of the mound was a small shoe, mud still clinging to it. Lewis knew then how deep the pull was, how quick and small the thing that came home could be. He felt the world turn under his feet, like a boat caught on a rip in the river. Behind him, just past the line of trees, something that had been sleeping moved, and the wood sighed as if waking. He did not yet know what he had brought back. He only knew this. Once a thing leaves the ground, it carries a promise inside it that will always want to be kept. The story of Ludlow doesn't end where the road fades or the snow buries the stones. Some places are patient. They wait for footsteps, for grief, for the sound of a name spoken too softly to take back. The woods beyond the deadfall still breathe when the wind stops, and sometimes if you listen long enough, you can hear the faint scratch of a shovel, the whisper of someone calling a loved one home. But remember this, no ground that steals the living ever gives them back whole. The pet cemetery isn't evil. It's just open. Waiting. And one day someone new will move into that white house by the woods and they'll see the path. They'll think it's nothing. Just a trail through the trees. Until the night the earth stirs again, and the dead remember the way home.